On September 19th, 1977, 52-year-old Yutaka Kume vanished without a trace from the Noto Peninsula in Ishikawa Prefecture in Japan. What initially appeared to be a simple local disappearance spiraled into a massive international incident, likely involving North Korean agents. Kume, a security guard employed at Tokyo's Mitaka City Hall, had traveled to the scenic coastal area reportedly for a short trip. The day before he disappeared, he phoned a colleague and casually mentioned, quote, "I'm at a hot spring in the Noto Peninsula right now," which would be the last time anyone heard from him. The next day, Kume was seen walking along a beach near the town of Ushitsu in Noto, and then he simply never returned. Initial efforts to find Kume yielded few clues, and local police combed the coastline and interviewed residents, but no witnesses could clearly explain what happened that evening. In the absence of immediate evidence of foul play, speculation began to swirl. Strangely, a local newspaper in November 1977 even suggested that Kume might have defected to North Korea by boat. This idea, that a middle-aged City Hall security guard would abruptly flee Japan for North Korea, seemed far-fetched. Yet, with no body found and Kume gone, more conventional theories, such as an accidental drowning or voluntary disappearance, struggled to account for the mystery. Unbeknownst to the public at the time, however, Japanese police had already encountered alarming signs that something far more sinister had occurred on that Noto beach. Behind the scenes, investigators had suspicions that were not immediately revealed to the media. On the very evening of Kume's disappearance, police in Ishikawa received a report of a suspicious boat spotted in nearby Toyama Bay. That night, Kume was staying at a local inn with another man, and the inn's owner grew uneasy when the pair went out late, since there was nowhere obvious to go after dark on the quiet coast. The police were put on high alert, and officers rushed to the area. They arrived to find that Kume was already gone, but his companion, a Korean national identified only as Lee, was still on shore. Lee was promptly arrested, though only on minor charges of violating immigration registration laws. When police searched his belongings and home, they uncovered clandestine tools of espionage, including cipher tables and code books. These startling finds strongly suggested that Lee was a North Korean agent or collaborator involved in a covert operation. Despite these red flags, the case did not immediately transform into a well-publicized kidnapping investigation. Incredibly, Lee was never prosecuted for abducting Kume. He was released after a suspended indictment, and even later allowed to naturalize as a Japanese citizen. At the time, authorities treated the incident cautiously. The full details were kept quiet, and for years the public narrative barely acknowledged any crime. In fact, the incident was long reported merely as a minor story about a Japanese man illegally leaving Japan for the Korean peninsula. Over the following decades, patterns began to emerge that cast Kume's disappearance in a new light. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, a number of Japanese citizens mysteriously vanished, many of them from coastal areas, under puzzling circumstances. By the 1990s, the families of these missing people, alongside the help of investigative journalists, started connecting the dots. What they discovered was one of the biggest stories in post-war Japanese history. They suspected that North Korean agents had been covertly kidnapping Japanese citizens during that era. These once unthinkable claims gained credibility through evidence and even admissions by North Korean operatives. Eventually, the Japanese government officially recognized 17 cases of abduction by North Korean spies, with Yutaka Kume listed as the earliest known victim. Kume's case, in particular, fits the now established pattern of North Korean abductions. According to investigations by Japanese police, Kume was targeted by a North Korean spy network operating inside Japan. In Tokyo, he was approached by a man later identified as Kim Si-ho, a North Korean agent using the alias Yoshida. Kim, with the help of several North Korean residents in Japan, allegedly enticed Kume with a proposal for a lucrative business deal. This ruse was likely a trap. Once Kume agreed to travel with them, purportedly to discuss the deal, he was escorted to Ishikawa Prefecture. There, on a quiet Noto beach, Kim's team handed Kume over to another operative who was waiting with a boat. Under cover of darkness, Kume was taken across the Sea of Japan by boat, bound for North Korea. It was effectively a state-sponsored kidnapping, an ordinary Japanese citizen snatched from home shores and spirited away to a foreign land. The motive behind such abductions later became somewhat clearer. During the 1970s and 1980s, North Korea carried out a secret program to abduct foreigners for various purposes. Japanese nationals were targeted to steal their identities and to train North Korean spies in Japanese language and culture. In several cases, abductees were forced to teach Japanese language classes to North Korean agents, helping them learn how to pass as Japanese abroad. In other more sinister cases, women were forcibly married to North Korean officials and instructed to raise their children as the perfect infiltrators of Japanese society. These children were raised speaking Japanese natively and had all the inherent mannerisms associated with Japanese people rather than North Korean people. This, of course, reminds me of that famous scene in *Inglourious Basterds*, where a spy makes a 3 sign with his fingers in an American or British way rather than a German way. This, of course, gives him away to the Germans, despite his perfect mastery of the German language, leading to dire consequences. By having the children raised in a perfectly immersive pseudo-Japanese environment, this issue is, in essence, solved. In Kume's situation, investigators believe he was lured under false pretenses because his abductors saw an opportunity. He was a lonely and unremarkable middle-aged man who could be taken with little public fuss. Indeed, at the time, Kume lived alone and had been out of touch with his immediate family, which might have made him an easier target. North Korea, for its part, has consistently denied any involvement in Yutaka Kume's disappearance. In 2002, North Korean leader Kim Jong-il admitted for the first time that North Korea had abducted Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. However, the regime insisted that Kume never entered North Korea. Despite these denials, Japanese authorities consider the North Korean abduction theory to be the most credible explanation by far. In January 2003, based on accumulated evidence and testimony, Japanese police took the unprecedented step of obtaining an arrest warrant for Kim Si-ho. By way of reminder, he was the North Korean spy alleged to have orchestrated Kume's kidnapping. It was the first time a direct arrest warrant was issued for a North Korean agent in an abduction case. Kim, believed to be back in North Korea, was placed on Interpol's wanted list, and Japan formally demanded his extradition. North Korea has refused to cooperate, claiming to have no knowledge of Kim's whereabouts or even his identity. As of today, Kim Si-ho remains a fugitive, and Yutaka Kume's fate in North Korea, if he indeed was taken there, is still unknown. In October 1997, a person walking through a wooded area near the small town of Wilkson in Washington state made a grim discovery: a set of human skeletal remains. The remains were found off a rural stretch of Gale Creek Road, about 9 miles from Wilkson School and just south of the town of Buckley. In the remote, dense woods, roughly a 45-minute drive from Seattle, it was clear the body had lain hidden for some time. Detectives from the Pierce County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene, but the immediate investigation yielded few clues about who the victim was or how she had died. Authorities determined the remains belonged to a female, roughly 5 feet 5 inches tall, and likely between 20 and 50 years old. Her skeletal remains were fully clothed, and she was wearing a distinctive long-sleeve sweatshirt emblazoned with the words Pacific Lutheran University. These personal items provided strong circumstantial evidence that the woman had ties to the local area, as Pacific Lutheran University is located in Tacoma. The authorities searched missing person reports and contacted local campuses, believing she may be a student, yet no immediate leads surfaced. It seemed as if this woman had simply vanished into the woods without anyone knowing. Forensic examiners noted a few distinctive features on the remains. The woman had suffered a number of serious injuries during her life that had healed by the time of her death. She had a previously broken right thigh bone that had healed in a way that left her right leg slightly shorter than her left, a condition that may have caused a noticeable limp. She also bore evidence of past trauma to her jaw. A fracture of the lower jaw had been treated with surgical wiring, and some of her teeth were missing or had dental work. These healed injuries were unusual markers. In theory, they could have been key to identifying her if dental records or hospital records matched someone. Despite these potentially identifying characteristics, the investigators hit a dead end. No matching dental records were found, and crucially, no missing person report appeared to correspond to this unknown woman. With no identification and no immediate evidence of what caused the woman's passing, the case grew cold. There were no obvious signs of acute trauma, and without a name or background, investigators couldn't say whether she died from an accident, exposure, or foul play. Still, the circumstances, a relatively young woman found deceased in the woods, were suspicious enough that detectives treated the case with concern. Over the years, officials made periodic efforts to identify the Jane Doe. In 2009, more than a decade after the body was found, her details were entered into the NamUs database. This database is a nationwide repository meant to match unidentified remains with missing persons cases. The entry included her physical description, DNA profile, dental information, and descriptions of her clothing and healed injuries. An artistic forensic reconstruction of her face was also created in hopes that someone might recognize her. By the 2020s, advances in forensic science offered new hope for long unsolved cases like this one. In late 2023, the Pierce County Sheriff's Office decided to take a fresh approach to their Jane Doe case using cutting-edge DNA technology. They submitted preserved biological evidence from the 1997 remains to Othram. As you may be aware, Othram is known for its work in forensic genetic genealogy, a technique that goes beyond standard DNA profiling by constructing a person's genetic family tree. The goal was ambitious. If they could build a detailed DNA profile of the unknown woman, they might link her to relatives and finally discover her name. Othram's scientists were able to extract a viable DNA sample from the decades-old remains and perform what they call forensic-grade genome sequencing. This process decoded a comprehensive map of the woman's genetic markers. It was a painstaking process, involving months of genealogical research and cooperation from family members who were likely surprised to learn of a long-lost relative. Finally, in early April 2025, the decades-old mystery was solved. The once anonymous victim was conclusively identified as Lori Craig, born December 17, 1959. After 27 years of anonymity, Pierce County's Jane Doe had her name back. When authorities announced Lori Craig's name in April 2025, they also began to piece together the story of her life and the circumstances of her disappearance. Lori was in her mid-30s at the time she went missing in the mid-1990s. She was a local resident of Pierce County, Washington, but surprisingly little is known about her personal life. At the time of her disappearance, Lori was married to a man named Ronald Martin, who was a few years her senior. According to official records, Lori was last confirmed alive in January 1996. Sometime after that point, she vanished. Strikingly, as law enforcement later noted, no one filed a missing person report when Lori went missing, not her husband, nor any immediate family. This fact has raised extreme suspicion amongst investigators and amongst online true crime communities. Whatever the reason, the lack of a missing persons report meant Lori's name was never entered into databases back in 1996. Thus, no one connected her to the Jane Doe found in 1997. Identifying Lori Craig was a huge step forward, but it was only the beginning of a new chapter in this cold case. With her identity known, the Pierce County Sheriff's Office announced that they were officially investigating Lori's death as an intentional slaying. Now that the case has turned into a different kind of investigation, detectives are retracing Lori's footsteps in the mid-1990s. They're trying to construct a timeline of her life leading up to her disappearance in January 1996. In particular, investigators are looking closely at the people in Lori's life at that time. Foremost among them, her late husband, Ronald Martin. Notably, Ronald Martin died in 2020 of natural causes, meaning he's of course not around to answer questions or shed light on what happened to Lori. Police have not publicly named him or anyone else as a suspect, and they emphasize that they have not determined who is responsible yet. However, it has not gone unnoticed that the one person who would have been expected to report Lori missing, her spouse, never did so. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick shout out to all my supporters on Patreon and through YouTube memberships. Also, after you're done here, check out my other channels, Lazy Chill History and Lazy Chill True Crime. These channels revolve around historical content and solve true crime cases respectively. On July 2, 2011, witnesses on Montreal's Jacques Cartier Bridge saw a young man with striking bright red hair climb over the railing and plunge into the St. Lawrence River. The bridge, busy with summer traffic, briefly became the scene of a desperate emergency. Police and fire crews were alerted immediately, but no rescue was possible once the man disappeared into the waters far below. For days, authorities searched the river without success. Finally, on July 7, 2011, a body matching the description of the jumper was discovered on the river's banks. It was the same red-haired man who had been observed going off the bridge just days earlier. With no identification found on him and no immediate clues to his name, he became known only as the Montreal John Doe of 2011. The victim was a white male estimated to be in his late 20s. He stood around 5'10" and weighed about 160 pounds. Notably, he had distinctive shoulder-length, bright orange-red hair, a pale complexion, and brown eyes. Investigators observed a scar on his right wrist, but no tattoos or other unique marks. The Jacques Cartier Bridge, an imposing steel structure connecting the city to its south shore, has long been infamous as a spot for that activity. Since it opened in the 1930s, hundreds of people have, in their lowest moments, made life-ending decisions at this location. By the early 2000s, it was estimated that over 700 individuals had perished at this bridge, putting it only behind the Golden Gate Bridge in terms of deadliest bridges for this activity. For decades, this led to a grim reality. Approximately 10 people a year perished intentionally in the vicinity of the bridge. In 2004, in response to this disturbing toll, authorities installed a high steel prevention barrier along the pedestrian walkways. This barrier, essentially tall fencing topping the railing, was meant to deter jumpers. The Jacques Cartier Bridge, once an all-too-easy venue for an impulsive tragedy, had become significantly harder to jump from. However, the 2011 John Doe case proved that determined individuals could still find a way. Despite the barrier, this man managed to get over the railing. Montreal authorities treated the case with great urgency and care. The coroner's office conducted an autopsy to confirm the cause of death and look for any clues. The autopsy found no signs of foul play or trauma beyond injuries consistent with a fall from a great height. Investigators gathered every detail they could about the John Doe's appearance and belongings, hoping something might spark recognition. Notably, he had a thin chain bracelet on his left wrist, made of silver-colored metal, with multiple interlocking rings added to extend its length. The bracelet appeared to have a name engraved on it. The word Michel was discernible on the plate. And just for clarity here, that's the French version of the masculine name Michael, rather than the name Michel. He also had what's been described as a Lord of the Rings style ring on one of his fingers. This was a metal band resembling the One Ring from the famous fantasy novels, complete with what looked like elvish script etched into it. He also wore a green elastic band around his left bicep, for reasons which are entirely unclear. From the outset, the engraved name Michel on the bracelet stood out as the strongest potential lead. Was Michel his name? And if so, was it his first name, or perhaps a family name? While it's commonly a French first name, it's not an uncommon surname either. Standard identification procedures were undertaken. Fingerprints were taken from the body and run through databases. DNA samples were collected and stored. The Quebec coroner's office noted that all typical tests were done: digital fingerprinting, DNA profiling, checking dental records, but no matches turned up immediately. For a DNA match, officials would need a known relative's sample for comparison, which they didn't have. Authorities also scoured missing person reports, but no active missing person case in Montreal or in Quebec matched this man's description. In fact, nobody had reported him missing at all. This was a perplexing fact. A man in his late 20s vanished, yet no friends or family had alerted police. Recognizing they had reached a dead end with internal records, Montreal police turned to the public for help. On October 1st, 2011, about 3 months after the incident, an appeal ran in the Montreal Gazette and other media. The police published a blurry image taken of the man showing his face and distinctive red hair. The public appeal generated attention and some tips, but none led to a positive ID. People who saw the news contacted police with various suggestions. Perhaps he was a relative who hadn't been in touch, or a friend they lost contact with. Every lead was checked, but the mystery man's name and story remained elusive. By late 2011, with no solid leads, the John Doe was laid to rest anonymously, his remains stored in case future forensic advances or inquiries might identify him. With all that said, there's been rumors swirling around online in recent days that the Quebec coroner's office may be closing in on the identity of this unknown young man. Like with so many cases I cover, I suspect that the power of genetic genealogy will allow this case to be fully cracked once and for all, and give this man his identity back. I hope to have an update on this Montreal John Doe in a future video. The Bosnian pyramid theory revolves around the controversial claim that a group of hills in Visoko, Bosnia, and Herzegovina are ancient man-made pyramids. Since 2005, Bosnian researcher Samir Osmanagic has promoted these hills, especially Visotica Hill, which he calls the Pyramid of the Sun, as the world's largest pyramidal structures. According to Osmanagic, early Europeans built these pyramids around 12,000 to 30,000 years ago, predating known complex civilizations in the region. Although captivating public imagination and boosting tourism, Mainstream archaeologists and geologists overwhelmingly dismiss these claims as pseudoscience at best. Supporters assert several key claims in relation to the Bosnian pyramids, many of which are extremely controversial. Supporters generally frame these alleged pyramids as evidence of a lost advanced civilization, potentially rewriting European prehistory. Further, many of these supporters are ardent Bosnian nationalists who are eager to rewrite European and world prehistory around their nation. Supporters' focus is around the main hill, the Pyramid of the Sun, which measures roughly 720 feet high, allegedly dwarfing Egypt's Great Pyramid. Proponents argue its geometric shape indicates intentional human engineering. Osmanagic claims the Bosnian structures form, quote, the greatest pyramidal complex globally, and were built during Europe's Ice Age period. Advocates highlight precise alignment of the Pyramid of the Sun to the cardinal directions, arguing this indicates deliberate architectural planning. They also note the pyramid's symmetrical shape and flat summit, suggesting human shaping. Excavations organized by Osmanagic's foundation uncovered stone slabs on hillsides, interpreted as ancient building materials or concrete blocks shaped by prehistoric builders. Radar and thermal scans have also reportedly detected organized human-made structures or tunnels beneath the hills. Proponents highlight tunnels in Visoko as part of a larger network connecting pyramids. Osmanagic claims these tunnels contain monolithic stones, carvings, and artifacts older than 15,000 years, implying a complex ancient construction. And keep that in mind because I'll be coming back to this claim specifically in a moment. Despite captivating the public, Osmanagic's claims fail to meet scientific scrutiny, according to experts. Geologists unanimously identify the Visoko Hills as natural formations known as flatirons, steep triangular slopes formed by natural erosion. Analysis by a local university confirmed the hills consist of alternating layers of conglomerate rock, sandstone, and clay, consistent with natural geological processes. Upon further examination from outside experts, the formation has been described as completely mundane. Additionally, the supposed ancient concrete is widely recognized as natural conglomerate stone by geologists who've examined it. Archaeologists emphasize the absence of legitimate artifacts consistent with a pyramid-building civilization. Despite years of excavation, Osmanagic's team has not found pottery, tools, bones, inscriptions, or infrastructure that would accompany monumental construction. Experts argue that such a structure, if it were actually what he claimed, would be ripe with all these findings. Further, many alleged man-made structures, such as stone blocks, slabs, and terraces, are natural rock formations, fractured into geometric shapes. Experts note that excavation methods may have exaggerated or artificially enhanced these natural appearances to mislead observers. Furthermore, reports emerged indicating that some quote-unquote ancient inscriptions were recent carvings. This suggests the strong possibility that evidence has been fabricated to fit the pyramid narrative, further undermining credibility. Notably, in the fervor to prove that these sites constitute pyramids, actual historical sites have been damaged. Given the prominence of Visosika Hill, which pyramid advocates claim is the Pyramid of the Sun, it should come as no surprise that it was used for medieval fortifications. Samir Osmanagic's team has been accused of having damaged this cultural heritage while attempting to prove that the hill is actually a pyramid. This has naturally led to significant criticism from mainstream historians, who may otherwise have seen this as a relatively harmless, though pseudo-archaeological exercise. Perhaps just as interesting as the Bosnian pyramids theory is why this mystery has caught on to such a degree in Bosnia itself. The popularity of the theory can likely be partly understood through sociological theories that examine how societies respond to collective trauma and search for identity after devastation. Following the Bosnian War, which left deep scars on the national psyche and physical landscape, many people looked for narratives that could restore a sense of pride and belonging. The theory taps into a desire to rewrite history in a way that offers hope, resilience, and perhaps most importantly, renewal. One theory suggests that in the aftermath of conflict, communities are more receptive to alternative histories that promise a lost golden age. In a country that suffered immense devastation, the idea of an ancient civilization with advanced knowledge provides a counterbalance to memories of recent suffering. The Bosnian pyramid narrative becomes a symbolic reclamation of a glorious past, one that contrasts sharply with the recent horrors of war. This reimagined heritage not only creates a unifying myth, but also offers tangible benefits, such as boosting tourism and fostering local economic recovery. And to put this in perspective, this town that would have otherwise been unremarkable gets up to 200,000 tourists a year now.